What is both fascinating and disturbing about humans is that we are the only creatures on Earth that will actually do less than we're capable of doing. And, as a past biology professor who taught about the human body and evolution and genetics, it never ceases to amaze me to watch, how all other living organisms on Earth will do everything they're capable of doing. Like, take trees, for example. Okay. I'm out hiking today by myself, and so I've been spending a lot of time reflecting um, and one thing I've been watching and observing, and I like to do this, is to look at tree roots, and I like to see all the obstacles that trees are navigating around. And because trees don't have a brain, they don't have the capability of reaching an obstacle like a rock and saying, I'm not capable of getting around this rock. It just does it. It's programmed in its genes to get around obstacles so it can survive. But humans are different because we do have a brain, and a very big brain at that. And so, what's so interesting is we can actually, with our big, beautiful brains, can actually talk ourselves out of navigating around an obstacle and actually can convince ourselves that we're not even capable of doing it when we have every capability of overcoming not only the obstacle in front of us, but really any obstacle that ever comes in our path. And it's really interesting for me to see over and over how humans can convince themselves that they're capable of doing less than they actually are capable of. And I get this a lot because my coaching practice specifically focuses on post-traumatic growth. And so one of my major missions in my practice is to help my clients reach the pinnacle of trauma healing, which is, again, post-traumatic growth, thriving after trauma. And when I talk about post-traumatic growth, I get a lot of people who just dismiss the idea altogether. And one way that they dismiss it is by saying things like, oh, but you're special, you had this was different about my circumstances, and this was what was different about you. And they'll go on and create this list of reasons why they're not capable of achieving what I've achieved and what others like me have achieved. And because of my teaching of all these subjects for all these years, I know that what one human being is capable of, every single one of the almost 8 billion people on Earth are also capable of the same thing. When I walk, I'm always hiking, and when I see all these trees, it doesn't matter the species of tree, they all will navigate around obstacles because it is programmed in their genes to survive. And in order to survive, they need to get around obstacles, and they got to do whatever it takes, or they just won't survive. But humans are capable of just facing an obstacle and saying, I'm done here. I'm not going any further. I don't know how to get around this. Whereas, like, you take even like ants, let's take worker ants that are going around harvesting, things from their home and the food and all these different things. When they get to an obstacle, they don't just say, I don't know how to get around this. I'm going to give up. I'm going to drop my food. I'm going to drop, whatever it was that I'm building my home or nest with, whatever it is, and just give up. No, they keep going until they figured it out. And it's because they don't have the capabilities to override what their genes are telling them. But the thing with humans is we have the capability to override what our genes want us to do. And it's so fascinating, but also disturbing because we have so many people on Earth that are just existing and barely at that, and and so many of us are in pain, and you've probably heard the common saying, hurt people hurt people. And so many of us, before we leave this earth, will experience a tremendous amount of suffering. and most of it will be by the hands or words or some other form of action by other humans. And so that means that all of us are going, and even if it's not trauma that we endure, we're going to have to face some form of adversity in our life. I mean, it's just the kind of world we live in. And, trying to resist that is just, an impossible, it's a futile task, because it's just, again, the world we live in. And so I hope you don't fall into this category of being one of these people that are just existing on Earth, or feel that you're not capable of doing what another human is capable of doing. I hope you're not in that boat, but don't worry if you are, because most of us, especially those of us who have experienced trauma, the inevitable traumas of life, we get to that point where we just want to give up, and we say it's too hard to move forward. I was there too, so I don't want to make it sound like, that I never experienced this kind of hardship, because actually, because I've experienced years of suffering, I just, thought I couldn't endure any more, not one bit. And I did want to just curl up in a ball and just make it all end. But I chose eventually to not do that, and to keep moving forward. And recently I was on a trip out into the northern Midwestern, some of the northern Midwestern states in the U.S., on a hiking trip with some friends. And one of the hikes we did was Black Elk Peak, and the highest point in South Dakota. And it's about a 7-mile hike round trip, and a little over 1,000 feet of gain. And one of the friends I was with, she's blind, and she's only been blind now for about 5 or 6 years. And so a huge portion of her life she spent sighted. But now she's chosen to not give up. And of course, life is still really hard and still throws her obstacles, but she's chosen to keep going. And on that same hike, what was really interesting is at the same time that we summited, well, right after, like a few minutes after we summited, and we're sitting down and having our lunch, a man with a prosthetic leg comes and reaches the summit. So here he is, having, for most of his life, having all 4 limbs, and then he lost one. But he kept on going. He got a prosthetic leg, and he kept on moving. And with my friend, she used tools at her disposal as well, as far as resources, hiking pole and hiking partners, but she did it. And I did the same thing. And that's why none of us, myself, my friend, this guy, we're not special. We're just humans, and we're living creatures that all have programmed in our genes to be able to overcome adversity and to want to exist. And see, this is another thing about humans. We're also the only creatures that will wish away, that will actually stop our existence, or to want to stop our existence. These other organisms that either don't have a brain or have a really small brain, they don't have the capability to wish their life away and to want to stop living. They just don't have the capability. Literally, their genes are telling them we're all about survival. We are the only creatures on Earth that can actually talk ourselves out of wanting to live, and out of wanting to live life to its fullest. And so I'm coming on today to ask you if you've done this yourself, and if you are, and it doesn't even have to be with life in general. You don't even have to be in this place where you don't want to live, to contemplate what I'm saying. Because people give up in other ways. People give up not just by, ending their life. They give up by staying in careers and relationships that are sucking the life out of them. They give up by not pursuing a goal because they think it's too hard, or they don't have the capabilities or resources to achieve it. They give up when they face a really hard obstacle and say, I just can't endure anymore. And I'm asking you, have you done this? Are you doing this in any aspect of your life? And if you are, how can you change that narrative? And see, and this is why I'm constantly talking about reframing, changing perspective, because the way that we limit ourselves from doing more than we're capable of doing is by the stories we tell ourselves. And what's so fascinating about humans as well is because we repeat our stories so often. Sometimes we hear really destructive stories from those around us. We actually can start to believe, we can convince ourselves that it's true, even when it's not, just because we've heard it so many times, either from other people or from ourselves, when in actuality, it's not true. And so we limit ourselves by things that aren't even real. And, and, and that's really, again, fascinating and disturbing all at the same time. And that's why I am so like a huge advocate of constantly learning and constantly filling my brain and encouraging others to fill their brains with alternate ways of thinking in the forms of books and podcasts and YouTube videos. And again, not all alternate ways of thinking are good, nor should you adopt them. But with our big, beautiful brains that we have the capability to think critically and take in information and process it and take what's useful and let go of what's not. But if you have a narrative on replay in your mind that's keeping you small in your life and keeping you stuck in a life that you don't enjoy and may even despise, I encourage you to think about, how can you change that narrative? And one way to change that narrative is by listening to videos like this one and seeing that there is another way of thinking. There's another way of existing, and then continuing to fill your mind with alternate ways of thinking. And when you find yourself going down a rabbit hole of useless thoughts, and where you're feeling stuck, that's the time where you need to put on some audio or read a book, an alternate way of thinking, so you can stop the rumination of negative thoughts. And yeah, so I'm starting to get bit, so I was like, we gotta come to an end now. Sorry. Of course, whenever I'm out hiking, there's always going to be bugs, unless it's winter. So winter's coming, so maybe we won't have so many bugs. I just won't be able to record as long when winter comes, so maybe that's a good thing. So of course, as always, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, and I'm always happy to help. And as always, I wish you well on your healing journey, and I wish you well as you navigate through life and over and around and beyond the obstacles that fall in your path. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye for now.